Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Paige Berger, and I am the marketing director here at Barrett Bookstore. I'm so pleased to be here this evening with my colleague, Rosanna Nissen, who's in the back manning all the technology, our wonderful event coordinator, and thrilled to have our guests, Carola Lovering and Sara Shepard, who we will introduce properly in a moment. We're also really thrilled to be here tonight with our friends from the Darien Library. It's been a year, which is hard to believe, but we've been partnering on these events for about that amount of time, and we're thrilled to have such a strong partner here in the virtual space to bring you program like tonight's event. We have a bunch of additional programs coming up in March that we're very excited about. Two of note that you may want to mark down on your calendar now. We are hosting Harlan Coben and John Grisham in conversation on Monday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. Both have new books coming out. Harlan's book is coming out March 16th. It's called Win, and John Grisham has a new novel coming out, a little bit of a different style. I hear it's a novel about basketball that's coming out in April, so you can look forward to hearing about both of those books. The other conversation I want to highlight is one we're very excited about. We're going to be hosting Chef Mashama Bailey, who is the celebrated cook behind the Gray Restaurant in Savannah, Georgia, James Beard award-winning. She'll be here with her business partner, John Omorisano. They're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. They're going to be talking about race, class, gender, and it's going to be a really fantastic evening. That's Wednesday, March 24th at 7 p.m. You can sign up for all of these events on our website. Just head on over to our events page, and there will be links there. That'll get you started. For those of you who aren't familiar with Barrett Bookstore, we're in our 81st year of business, and we could not do this without the support of our wonderful community. Tonight, we're thrilled to welcome those who do live in our community and the surrounding towns, and also guests from across the country. That is the beauty of this virtual space. And we also couldn't do this tonight without our wonderful authors. To support their work, please go to our website. They do these events free of cost and buy their books. Carola's new book, which came out today. She was in store today signing copies. It's beautiful. It's a wild ride. Highly recommend it. So come on in and pick that up. And we do ship across the United States if you're not local. I also want to give you a quick orientation to Crowdcast for those of us, if this is your first time joining us. As you can see on the side here, we do have a space where you can have a little chat. It says, say something nice. So if you do have something nice to say, you can pop it in there. We're also going to be taking questions at the end of the discussion tonight. So if at any point a question comes across your mind, please head down to the bottom of your screen and click on Ask a Question. You can pop your question in there at any time during the program. And before we wrap up tonight, we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. And now to introduce our distinguished authors. We're here tonight, as I said, to celebrate the release of Carola Lovering's new book. Show you it again. It's gorgeous, too good to be true. I read it over the weekend, and all I can say is buckle up. It is full of unexpected twists and turns. It's a lot of fun to read. Carola is also the author of Tell Me Lies, which Taylor Jenkins Reid called as dark and daring as it is absorbing. She attended Colorado College, and her work has appeared in New York Magazine, W Magazine, National Geographic, Outside, and Yoga Journal, among other publications. And she lives right here in Darien. We're thrilled to have her here tonight to celebrate the launch of her latest work. In conversation, we are so grateful to have Sara Shepard. Sara, of course, is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Pretty Little Liars series, The Lying Game, The Heiress, The Elizas, The Perfectionist, and Reputation. Her #1 New York Times bestselling Pretty Little Liars series was beloved by fans and adapted into a hit television series that ran for 7 seasons and inspired a spin-off show, The Perfectionist. Sara graduated from New York University and has an MFA from Brooklyn College. Carola, Sara, welcome. I am going to get out of here and unmute the two of you and let you have a conversation. Thank you so much to both of you.
Hello. Can we
Hi.
hear? Hi. All right, good. We can hear. All right. You can hear me too?
Okay. Good.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, you guys.
I am so excited to be here for the launch event. I feel like I actually read this book quite a while ago. I read it when it had another title.
Yes, it did have another title.
It had a different title at first, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's the same book. And I think it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and I just tore through it. I read a lot of thrillers, and I did not see the twists coming. I found the characters all really interesting. I cared about all of them, even though they weren't always making the right choices. I love this book. So I am so happy to be here and like ask you lots of questions about it.
Well, thank you, Sarah. You are such a legend, and I'm so honored to be here with you.
No, it's okay.
My sound is echoing. Do you know why that might happen, Paige? I'm hearing everything that I'm saying right after I say it.
Yeah, so do you have it open on 2 screens by any chance?
No, I don't.
Was it
echoing? Should I take out my headphones?
Yeah, did you have the headphones in during the test?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, if it's echoing, you might try to disconnect the headphones because we don't want you listening to that. That's super annoying.
Let me try that.
Okay. Welcome to virtual event land.
Yeah.
People.
I feel like this happens in all
We're like.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm going to mute you for a moment. Carola, what I want you to do is I'm going to nix you and I'm going to re-invite you on the screen and see if that helps with the sound. Okay? Okay. We're just going to do this real quick. Hang on, everyone. Okay. And I am going to get her right back up.
It's always something.
It's always something. There was we hosted Emma Straub in conversation with Courtney Sullivan, sort of in the midst of this. And I'm just getting Carola back up. And Emma told a great story because Courtney also had a lot of audio problems that when Emma was in conversation with Judy Blume, who wouldn't want to be in conversation with Judy Blume? We'd all be excited about that. She had to be on the mobile phone the whole time because Judy's audio was so bad. So let's hope we don't have to do that. Okay, Carola.
Oh
Gosh, are you still on Chrome?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I think she's going to have to, I'm looking at my tech support here, log off completely, restart your computer. Yep. I'm going to have you restart your computer. Everyone hang on for a second. We're all good. I'm going to have you restart and hang back on and come only on Chrome, shut down everything else on your computer, okay?
Okay.
Oh my God. It's like aliens.
All right. Sarah, while we're waiting for Carola to come back on, you had a book. Can you tell us a little bit about Reputation while we're waiting? Because I'm here to see you as well. And maybe people
yes, I had a book come out last year called Reputation. I actually did a couple events in Connecticut, although I don't think I was in Darien. I think I was in Westport and somewhere else. It is a thriller, a lot like Too Good to Be True. And it's about a university town where there is an email hack, and everybody's innermost messages that they wouldn't want to share with other, the world, are dumped onto this public server, and lots of secrets come out in interesting ways. And it's multi-POV. It was a lot of fun to write. I have been writing. I mostly, in the past, I have mostly been writing YA, but I have gotten more into writing more adult thriller kind of genre, which has been really, really fun. I have a new book coming out in the summer that is another adult thriller. It's funny to say adult, but I say that because then there's the YA side, and but
do you change when you're doing that? when you're toggling between YA and adult,
Mhm.
do you picture and write in a different way given the audience?
Yeah, I do. I mean, sometimes it's as minor as like word choice. Because in Reputation there are some young characters. There's a character and we're in her point of view and she's like 19 or 20, which isn't that different from a YA character, but it's also sort of you can delve into more mature subjects, like and people don't need to be as redeeming. I don't know. I think they can be a little bit more complicated. But yeah, I like to do both. It's interesting to think about both, and I love writing for teens. So I'm still really into that, but it's most of what I read though is adult fiction. So adult thriller fiction.
We were talking before we went live, when the tech works perfectly, by the way, everyone. We have a green room.
This is bizarre.
We were talking about pandemic reading though, and binging.
Yes.
Can you share with the audience what has brought you comfort during these times? We've been home for a long time. What are you reading?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, I reread a lot of stuff. I like could not start anything new. I think like this book was sort of the only thing that I read, and I read it really slowly. But I would reread. Curtis Sittenfeld's one of my favorite authors, so I like reread Prep. I reread. I don't even remember what I reread. Just like just books that I've read a million times, and I know what's going to happen, and I just felt very comforted by that. Then once things, you kind of were like, well, this is what it is. Oh, you're back.
I'm back. Is it working now?
It's working. I'm getting out of here, ladies. Listen, you guys, this is so fun because listen, if we were at the bookstore, everyone's like all polished, it all goes fine.
Totally.
And people are obsessed with reality stuff. So that was like brilliant on your part, Carola. That's like it's like a novel twisty plot. See you later.
TV.
Yeah, we were just chatting. I'm glad you're back.
Talking about, or maybe we can talk about the book.
We were not talking about the book yet. We were just talking about reading in general. But let's talk about the book.
Yeah.
I love the book. So tell me a little bit about Too Good to Be True. And I feel like a lot of people ask me these things too, like, where did the idea come from? Is there something do you have like a starting point? And was it a different starting point than you started with for Tell Me Lies? Did you start with a character? Did you start with a situation? It's always that's interesting.
So I'll give a little bit of like background on the book and what it's about. So for those of you who have not read it, it's a psychological suspense about a toxic relationship, or a toxic love triangle, I should say. And the perspectives rotate so that each character, each of the three main characters, has a perspective that rotates each chapter. And so to start, there's Heather. Skye is actually the first chapter. So Skye is a 29-year-old book editor living in New York. She suffers from a pretty crippling form of OCD that has made her love life pretty unsuccessful. But then she meets Burke, who is an older man. Well, older than Skye. I don't want to say. He's in his
his 40s, yeah.
But he is just like the guy that she's been looking for all along. They have this very fast whirlwind romance, get engaged after 6 months, and she's just deliriously happy. She's like, I finally found my person. I finally found love. And so the first chapter opens with their engagement. And then Burke's chapter, which is the next chapter, we learn that he's actually already married. and he already has a family, he already has kids, and he's using Skye for reasons that we don't know. And then the third chapter is Heather, and Heather's Burke's wife. And through her perspective, we learn her backstory with Burke, which starts 30 years in the past, and like a little bit about their relationship and how it evolved, and then their marriage, and that timeline works its way up to the present to meet up with the other two. And it's a very twisty book, so I don't want to, if I say more, I'll be giving too much away, but that's the premise. And I actually started writing with the big central twist in mind that happens in the middle of the book. So I came up with that twist first, and the rest of the book kind of formed around that twist, which is not what happened with Tell Me Lies. I mean, I think in both books, I more thought of like the concept first and the situation rather than a specific character or a specific theme. But like the situation kind of presented itself to me in my head, and I sort of sat with that situation for a bit and mulled it over and let it simmer. And then once I felt like I had kind of a handle on what I wanted to say and what I wanted the book to be, then I started writing. But it's more concept for me, more concept than, than like a specific character. But with Tell Me Lies, so Tell Me Lies was originally not a twisty book at all. It was, when I first wrote it, it was a coming of age story about a bad relationship. And the twisty element, like the suspense element of it, was kind of added later on. When I started working with an editor and we were passing back revisions, we decided to make it a darker book. And it's already, it's inherently a dark book, but we decided to just crank up the suspense. And so that was kind of my first real taste of writing suspense. And I really enjoyed it. And so when I sat down to write a second book, I felt like there were a few different directions I could have gone in, because Tell Me Lies is kind of like this hybrid book between like a few different genres. One being coming of age story, a little bit YA, and then it also has this suspense bent to it, and then it's also a little bit, I mean, I don't love the term women's fiction, but for lack of a better word, women's fiction. But what happened to Sara?
We're giving the audience a show tonight because they go to these author talks. Keep going, we're on it. Rosanna's in the back reconnecting her. I don't know what's going on there.
Sorry, you guys. Yeah, sorry about these tech difficulties. This is my first virtual event, and I don't really Zoom much because I work for myself, so I don't have colleagues. But yes, that is the book, and that's kind of where that inspiration came. It really, they're two very different books, and the writing process was so different for each one, because Tell Me Lies was my first book, and it was a story that is very personal to me, and it had been in my head for many years before I actually started writing it. And so with Tell Me Lies, I didn't outline at all. I knew the book in my head before I even started writing. I knew basically the whole book. I didn't even have to outline.
Back. I heard everything though. Okay, so keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just talking a little bit about how the process was different for Tell Me
Yeah,
Lies.
I can hear you. I can hear everything. It was very weird.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. You're back. And then for Too Good to Be True, I had a loose outline, nothing too structured. I know authors who write very detailed, 20-page Word docs outlining the whole book before they start. But for me, I don't I'm not that organized. I had like a loose outline that was in the notes section of my computer. And then this idea kind of took hold and I started writing. And I find that like, as I gain a little bit more momentum and start getting into the story, then the outline gets a bit more detailed and I like fill in the rest and that's kind of been my process with Too Good to Be True, but it's been two very different processes. So I feel like, I don't know, I think it totally depends on the book.
Totally.
Yeah. About writing it.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you didn't necessarily set out to write thrillers or, you know, psychological suspense, you know, sort of, and fell into it in a way. But it's I'm really surprised because it does not seem like forced at all. This book, like, I don't know. I feel like you're a very natural thriller writer. And yeah, the suspense is it's just paced really well. You don't see the twist coming. I am definitely an outliner of, well, you know, I think you're right. I think it does depend on the book. Certain books I write, and maybe this happens to you too, I'll start writing it. I wrote this book called The Elizas, and it like was one of the few books that I wrote that started with a character. And I didn't really know where it was going. And I wrote probably half of it. And I knew it was going to, you know, had a suspenseful element to it, but I thought the suspenseful element was different. And then suddenly I had like this brainwave and I had to go the whole way back and kind of change everything. Has that happened yet in either of your books that you've worked on where you've come upon like a plot element and then or a thematic element and you've had to go back and kind of, you know, rejigger everything?
I mean, that hasn't really happened yet, though this is only my second book and you've written like a million books. But I definitely have had to like rejigger twists and like, and I feel like I have trouble with the placement of the twists. Like I'll write a twist and it's so hard. I don't know if you feel this way, but it's so hard when you're writing to like know if a twist is going to be effective and if it's actually going to be something that's surprising to people. And like,
right.
I don't, you know, a lot of time when you're the writer and you're so into the story, you can't tell if it's going to be something that has any shock factor. So that is something that I feel like I've had to do with Too Good to Be True. And then I just handed in a draft of the third book and the feedback for that is like to rework the twists and time them better. And so that's something that like I end up having to do, which is, you know, pretty significant.
Yeah. I feel like plotting a thriller, suspenseful, you know, anything where you don't quite know what's going on and there is a twist or there's sort of a mystery about it, is a lot harder than plotting like your basic, just sort of, you know, a different sort of book.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's like a puzzle you get to put together and make sure that, and it is kind of, where do all those twists, where do they fit? Where do they, you know, where are they best for the reader and for the story? And that's really true. And I guess that's where editors come in and, you know, somebody reading it that's not you reading and being like, oh no, I wouldn't say it's, I mean, it's a whole team of people to write a book. So
it is. And I always say that to people. And I say like, I mean, editors and agents are so unbelievably helpful.
Yeah.
Crazy. I remember when I was writing my first book and I didn't have an agent for a while and I didn't have an editor. And I just got to this point where I was like, I need an editor. Like, I know that what I have, you know, is good. And I know that it needs work. I just can't fix it anymore. I need I need an editor. And it is so crucial.
So what was your journey to becoming a writer? I feel like everybody's is kind of different. And it's always one of my favorite questions.
Yeah. So I was an English major in college, and I didn't really have a lot of direction when I graduated. I had always loved writing and reading and literature, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I thought about careers where writing was involved, but never really creative writing. Like I thought about book publishing, magazine publishing, PR, and I ended up getting my first job out of college, ended up being in PR. And I worked at a couple different agencies in New York for a few years, and I liked it, but I wasn't passionate about it. I just knew that it wasn't my calling. And I kind of around this time, I'd been out of college for a couple of years, was working but not fully satisfied with what I was doing. It was in the wake of this toxic relationship that I'd experienced in college and then shortly after. And I had all of these feelings about it and thoughts about it. And I just really felt so pulled to write about it. And I hadn't done a lot of creative writing, so it was kind of new to me. But I just started writing. I started writing these kind of short stories / vignettes, inspired by this toxic relationship, this experience that I'd had. And it was kind of like my private, personal project. I didn't really tell anyone about it except for a few close friends and family members, but I just couldn't stop. And I was, writing at night and writing on the weekends. And then eventually my, this collection of short stories that I had, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I could turn this into a book. Like I could string this together and turn it into a novel. And I just was incredibly inspired to do this. And so I set out to do it, and I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never written a book. I didn't have a lot of education in creative writing specifically. But I really believed in the story. I believed it was good. I believed that it would resonate with other people. And so I worked on it. And once I had the novel finished, I started querying agents. And I'm not one of those authors who has the story of like, I finished my first book and sent it to agents and got offers immediately. Like that is not my story at all. I had a lot of rejection. I was rejected. Like I can't even count the number of rejection emails that I got, but I queried for at least a couple years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had people that were like, oh, I do like this, but it needs work. And no one signed me. And I almost gave up. I was almost at the point where I was like, you know what? I wrote this book and no one it's not going to get published, but maybe I'll write another book again someday. And as kind of like a last ditch effort, I enrolled in the New York Pitch Conference, which is this quarterly conference in Manhattan where industry professionals help aspiring authors revise their pitch query letters. And I didn't have any money saved at the time, so my parents gave it to me for my birthday present that year, was attendance to this conference. And I went, and the industry professionals helped me revise my pitch. And what I learned there was so essential, which was that I had been pitching Tell Me Lies in the wrong genre. So I had been pitching it as new adult fiction, which is not what Tell Me Lies is. It's kind of like this niche romance genre. And they said, you should just be pitching this as regular upmarket.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. Conference, I had a whole new pitch, and I was still in this mindset of like, I'm going to do everything I can, like pull out all the stops. And so I emailed an editor at Atria Books, Sarah Canton, who at the time had just, 5 years earlier, she had just taken over my cousin's job. My cousin used to work at Atria. And 5 years earlier, I was a senior in college, and I was thinking about going into book publishing. So my cousin had said, like, why don't you have an informational interview with the girl who just took over my job, Sarah. So Sarah talked on the phone like 5 years prior to this. And I didn't end up going into book publishing, but I ended up emailing her my pitch letter. And I was like, hi, I have no idea if you remember me. We talked on the phone all those years ago. Like, I didn't go into publishing, but I ended up writing a book. I looked at your list. I think that it might be up your alley. Would you ever want to read it? Which, is usually not how it works. I would say 99% of the time, like, you need to have an agent before an editor will look at your manuscript. So it was a long shot, but she was, very kindly said, yes, sounds interesting. Like, send me the first 50 pages and I'll try to read. And she ended up reading it really quickly and asked for the rest. And then I sent her the rest, and she ended up reading that really quickly. And she was like, I love this. I think it's really something. Do you have an agent? And I was like, no, I need an agent. No, I cannot be an agent. And so she referred me to a handful of agents. And then I think that once I had that like editorial interest, there was an editor that was interested. It had a bit more appeal. And so I got a couple offers and ended up working with my now agent, Allison, who's amazing. And we revised Tell Me Lies for about 9 months, and then sold it to Sarah at Atria in the fall of 2016. So it was a cool dream. And, I'm now able to do this full time, which is I'm so grateful for. It's just, I feel like I finally found my calling, and I feel so lucky. But it was a journey, it was a real journey.
Yeah. That's amazing. You do not hear that story. Although, I know how hard it is to get an agent. I mean, it's, and how people struggle, really talented writers. It's not the easiest thing. And I think that's like the complicated thing that people who are not in the book publishing business don't really understand. And like, when you're an author, well, what does that mean? And there's like lots of steps you have to go through before you can, even get a book out there into the world. So that is really cool. But the other thing I was going to say is, you saying like, well, I'd never really done much creative writing before or anything like that. The thing that I've kind of realized with creative writing is like, you learn by doing it, and you clearly by writing all of that and putting it together into a book and all that, and you had that great learning experience. And I think that's like the most valuable thing. You can't really learn that in a class. I mean, you just have to kind of do it, and that's very cool. And I know Sarah as well, so
I know.
Yes. Yeah. So that's very, very cool. I actually feel like Sarah gave me Tell Me Lies back in the day. So we met for coffee, and I think that's when she gave me Tell Me Lies. So I was very, very excited about it. Oh. So, which is like, it's a great story.
I know each other, because I can't remember.
What's that?
Will you remind me of how you and Sarah are connected?
So I was at Atria. I wrote the book I was talking about, the Elizas.
Yeah.
I was working with another editor at Atria, and she ended up leaving. She went off to, I think, become an agent. And I Sarah and I met with Sarah because I was working on something new, but I like didn't know what I was working on yet. But she was sort of taking my old editor's projects or kind of like, or her clients, or whatever. So that's how we were talking. And I'm trying to remember, like, I don't think I don't, it was quite a few years before I wrote another adult novel, like, because I had a lot of YA come out between the Elizas and Reputation, but I think it was a good like 2 or 3 years. So we just didn't like quite connect, but she's a great, and she's here. I see her in the chat. But yeah, she's a great editor. You're in like great hands. What else was I gonna? Okay, so sorry, I wrote out my questions. I'm gonna talk about the character. Well, all right. I mean, you kind of brought this up, but how much of what you write is from kind of a personal place, or inspired by people or things that have affected you? I mean, it sounds like Tell Me Lies was from something kind of personal, which like you could feel that in the pages of that book. I wasn't sure about Too Good to Be True, but I mean, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, are there pieces of it that you feel, were kind of inspired by personal things close to you?
Yeah, I mean, not nearly as much as Tell Me Lies. And I think you're right. I think you can feel it when you read a book. I think you kind of know, like, the author's been through this.
Yeah.
Yeah, not nearly as much as Tell Me Lies. Tell Me Lies was like, it's a fictional book, but it was born from a very personal place. Too Good to Be True is not. My husband is not married to another family that I know of.
That's good.
But I mean, one of the things that inspired the book was, well, I was planning my wedding when I wrote it, and Skye is planning her wedding in the book.
Right.
And I think I just felt like a lot of pressure when I was planning my wedding to be like this happy bride who was just like thriving on wedding planning. And underneath that, I felt a lot of pressure and stress. And I think that, like, it's a little bit different for Skye in the book, but I was experiencing that. And I felt like I kind of had to have this guise of like, everything's perfect. And I was so happy. I mean, I was so happy about getting married to my husband, but like the whole wedding planning process, I just found really stressful and kind of a pressure cooker. And so I think that that went into the book. And then also just the theme of deception. Not that it's personal to me. I mean, it kind of is. Like, I've been on the receiving end of deception, but I feel like I've noticed that I go back to writing about it all the time. Like, it just ends up being in all of my books. And I think, I'm really fascinated with deception because, I've been on the receiving end, I've witnessed it so much. I mean, we all have this year in politics. Right. I'm so fascinated by people who are deceitful, and I want to get in their minds and know how do they think and what are their motivations, and how can they sleep at night doing this. And so that's why I think I end up writing characters who are manipulative and deceitful, which that just ends up being a big theme in my book.
Yeah,
there wasn't really anything else. Like, there wasn't really anything else super personal. Oh, well, there was. So on the subject of, I know you had a question about OCD, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have OCD, but I do have like these 2 superstitions that I always have to do. Like I always knock on wood, and I always touch the clock when all the numbers are the same, like when it's 11:11 or 2:22. And my family does this too, so it's sort of been ingrained in me my whole life. But I've always had these superstitions, and those superstitions inspired Skye's OCD compulsions in the book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did a lot of research about OCD, but like the compulsions were like inspired by my superstitions. So I took those and I really magnified them and did research,
Right.
and then they became Skye's OCD compulsions.
Yeah. I mean, Skye definitely is the character when you're talking about planning your wedding. And I mean, she's the character who sort of looks perfect on the outside and is trying to keep it all together. But, you know, I think one of the first lines in the book is like, she's the guy, or she's like the girl guys think that they want, but actually don't, because of, you know, this OCD she suffers from. And, you know, it's not, I don't know. It's kind of like heartbreaking to read about, but I think you portrayed it really well. I mean, I don't have OCD either, but I know a few people who do. And, you know, you could just kind of feel just like I don't want to say shame, but she just is she's very like sort of emotional about her rituals, and yet kind of can't stop doing them. And yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's really important to portray mental illness as honestly and accurately as possible, and that's something that I tried to do in Tell Me Lies too. And you know, I think that anytime I can work to erase any stigma around it, you know, I try to. I also think OCD is something that it's kind of a label that gets tossed around. You know, if somebody's really neat and clean, then they're called OCD, which isn't fair. So I wanted to just really do my research and, you know, ultimately show that it doesn't have to be the be all end all of someone's life.
Right.
And I think that this is Skye's struggle in the book, or at least part of her struggle is she thinks that she's defined by her OCD.
Totally. Yeah.
She needs to realize.
Yeah.
Get to a place where she doesn't let it.
I had a YA book come out like a couple months ago called Influence, and one of the characters in it also has OCD, and it was interesting afterward how many people kind of came out, you know, and that even I knew, and was like, oh, I see this in myself. And it's like, it's good to see yourself, I think, in a character. And I think that's, you know, I think that was a great, I think that's just, I don't know. I was just surprised that was what people responded to, and felt very seen, and, you know, so, but yeah, no, it's I think always kind of researching and kind of painting it in like the kind of most real, authentic light you can. But yeah, no, I think it was great.
That's interesting that you say that. I'm well, number one, I need to read Influence. It's on my TBR. Also, I'm curious if that will happen to me when people read this book, because I've had a couple, maybe 2 early readers who've reached out and said like, yeah, I see myself in this.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if I'll hear from more people about that.
I bet you will, because it's a big, you know, it's, you know, she's an important character, and it's like you said, it's one of her, I bet, you know, it's one of her main struggles. So, yeah, I bet you will. Now you have a baby. Okay, so tell me your story. You had a baby in the pandemic, so that's fun.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
Yes.
So I also have kids. It's like a 2-part question. It's a baby question, and it's a pandemic question. So we'll start with the baby part. How has having a child changed your writing output, your writing habits, for the better or for worse? And also kind of this past year, I mean, you have like the double whammy of like, which maybe is a good thing, because with a baby, you're kind of inside anyway. I mean, it's not like you're really venturing out that much, but how has it changed your writing?
It has changed it a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like before my son was born, I could write whenever I wanted. I could write until 3 a.m. and then sleep till 11 if I wanted. If I wanted to write for 3 days straight because I was feeling super inspired, I could do that. And now it's just like my time is not my own, I mean, in the very best way, but my time is not my own. And so I feel like I have to be a lot more productive in the smaller windows of time that I have.
Totally. Yeah.
It feels like a lot of pressure sometimes, especially with writing, like when you have to be creative and some days you're just like tired and creative, but you're like, I have these 3 hours to write. I need to make it happen. And it's a lot of pressure and it's hard. And it's something that I'm definitely still figuring out. My son was born in August. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I took like 3 months off after that as my kind of like self-designated maternity leave. Because, when you have kids and you're a writer, you work for yourself, and there's no one saying like, this is the amount of time that you can take off. So I told myself I'm going to give myself 3 months, which I did, and it was wonderful. And then I started working again in November. But around that time was like late fall, early winter, and case counts were just getting everywhere. And so my husband and I just didn't feel comfortable committing to like daycare or a nanny. And so I realized like I have the luxury of having a flexible schedule where we didn't have to commit to those things. And so I've been working more part-time than I envisioned I would. And, I think that will change. I know it will change going forward now that the future, is looking brighter. But it's been really hard. It's just like, we're very lucky in that we have both of our sets of parents. My husband and I have both of our sets of parents live nearby. And so we do have some childcare, but then we also have days where we don't. And we're like both trying to work while we have our 6.5-month-old baby. We're like, what is going on? How are we supposed to do this?
Yeah.
So it's something that I'm figuring out. And I think having kids will be, I just imagine whatever ages they are, it changes because, I can't just write whenever I want anymore. But I also think a silver lining of it is that I am learning to be more productive.
Right.
You have to be. And so like, I don't have the luxury of just being like, oh, I have all day to write, but I really want to read this book or I really want to watch the show on Netflix. I have to sit down and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I had kids, I think I wasted a lot of time of the days, and I would work weekends because I could. And I remember after I had my son, like I had an edit due. I think he was only a few weeks old, and I remember like putting him in a little like bassinet sort of thing that you could kind of move around and like move to different rooms and like working on a laptop feverishly, whatever. I think I was on the floor. I was like, okay, I have like maybe 20 minutes while he does this little baby nap. And it was just like, it's hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard for a writer, at least for me, to stop and start, you know, to be like, okay, I'm going to work on this paragraph, but then I'm going to be interrupted. Like, sometimes I need, and especially if you're writing a suspenseful novel where you have to figure a lot of things out, you need some time to like think all of that through. I think I've become better too at, and maybe you have as well, as like at doing a lot of my book thinking and plotting just not in front of the computer, just taking a shower or like, you know, other times. I think I've become a little bit, my brain has become more trained to that, where even if I'm not sitting down working, I'm still thinking, because I kind of have to. And I don't think I used to do that before.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, you know, you adjust, I guess. But
I agree with that. And that's so true what you said about, like, you know, when you're a writer, you really have to be in it, and you can't, and stopping and starting is just like, you know, that kind of defies the whole purpose. Like, you need to get into the manuscript, you need to get into the characters and really be there and live there. And it's hard. Yeah. I've definitely had some times when literally like my son will be on my lap and I'm like trying to finish a paragraph. I'm like, just one more sentence, I can do it.
But you drafted a whole novel starting in November and ending now?
No.
Oh.
I wrote the first draft when I was pregnant, actually.
Oh, okay.
I had like the deadline of I need to finish this before I have a baby, because I knew that it was going to be really hard to write something from scratch with a newborn baby.
Oh, yeah.
And in November, I started like lightly revising what I had written, which I feel like it was more manageable to edit right now than it would be to write
that makes sense.
Scratch, you know?
Yeah. It is funny, although I know other writers who kind of underestimate how hard it's going to be. So at least you had the forethought going in of like, you know, because I know some writers who are like, well, I'll just have the baby and just work when the baby naps. But I had the kind of baby, at least my first son, who just didn't take predictable naps. So it just was like that went out the window. So no, I agree with you. I think, oh, hello.
Hi, I love all this. Kid done work talk. It's helpful, I think, you know, for those who are mothers and fathers. So thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to note we have a couple questions from the audience, and so I wanted to make sure we got those in. And also, anybody who has burning questions, feel free to pop them into the Ask a Question box at the bottom. Carola, there's a question about point of view. You write from the 3 different points of view in the novel. So this is someone who I think has read it, Burke, Skye, and Heather. Did you have a favorite character that you enjoyed writing that point of view? And can you tell us who and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that my favorite was Skye. And I think because, you know, of what I mentioned about like my wedding, I was planning my wedding at the time, I just felt most connected to her. And I just really enjoyed like being able to work those personal influences into her character. But it's funny actually, because with Tell Me Lies, my favorite perspective to write was the character that was the least like me, because I just found it really creative to get inside the head of a man. So I don't know why I feel differently about Too Good to Be True, but I just love Skye, and I don't know, I just adore her as a character, and I feel so like personally connected to her. I think I would just have to say Skye, but it's hard because I love them all.
Yeah. They're all your babies. Sara, do you have a favorite character among, you've written, as Carola was saying, so many different books. Is there a character that stands out to you that you really enjoyed living in their head and writing from that point of view?
Oh, I would say 2. I mentioned the book I wrote called The Elizas, and that came from a character. And she's just like, she's just a very compelling, interesting character that I don't know where she came from, but I really, really liked writing about her. And she's not like me. She's a writer as well, but like really nothing like me. But sometimes that's fun. And then the other character I really loved writing about from Pretty Little Liars, and it's none of the liars actually. It's Allison. She was like sort of the villain. And I just really like writing about people who you don't like, at least at first, but then kind of digging in and kind of understanding why they are the way they are. But I've had there's lots of characters that I've read. Oh, thank you for putting the link. But
I
yeah.
think you both do a really good job at that. I noticed that in your book too, Carola. And as I said, it's hard with thrillers because you don't want to give anything away. But I agree with you. I think sometimes the people who are the villains, when you can layer them in a way that shows the humanity, I think that's really present in your book as well, Carola. And it's
I mean, in Too Good to Be True, there's definitely some villainous characters, but like, you understand why they're, I don't want to give too much away, but like why they're doing what they're doing.
And that's what I wanted. I mean, I don't really want to write just someone who's purely a villain with no qualities, like you want to be able to understand a character and like why they would do that. And
right.
I always want to make my characters human, at least to some degree.
Yeah.
I think like the Disney villain is, I don't know. It doesn't really work in my books.
Yeah.
Totally.
I see a question here. Are you going to drop any hints about the plot of what you're working on, or is it's all wrapped up in?
So I just handed in a first draft of it, and I have some notes, and based on the notes, I do think it's going to change a bit. So I don't want to say too much about it, but what I can say is that it's a very similar genre to my first two books. Psychological suspense about relationships, one of them being a toxic relationship, and marriage and female friendships thrown in there. This book specifically kind of looks at your 20s versus your 30s and like how your 30s don't turn out the way that you think they will in your 20s. It's kind of about unfinished love, haunted love.
Ooh, that sounds
Can't wait.
good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, final question for the evening. So, Carola, you spoke a lot about your path, which was a little bit untraditional to writing. And Sara, I know you have an MFA, and someone wants to know, should she go for the MFA?
So me getting an MFA, that, I did a lot of creative writing. I was the kid who like didn't play outside. I wrote stories. But getting an MFA was sort of a response to September 11th. I was living in New York, and that horrible thing happened, and I was kind of working in publishing, but it was like magazine publishing. I didn't want to be doing that. And I didn't know that I would ever write a novel that would be published, but I just wanted to do something that I'd always wanted to do. And luckily, Brooklyn College, it's a CUNY school. It was not super, it was within my budget, and there are amazing teachers there and whatever. That said, I made great friends there. I had great professors. Do you need to do it? No, I don't think so. I learned a lot more, in what I did after that. I was a ghostwriter for a long time on other projects that did not have my name on them, and the ideas were brought to me, and it was like, write this whole book. That's really how I learned how to write a book and how to edit and be edited and and write dialogue and pace and all of those things. So I think there are a lot of paths to becoming a writer. And, you know, if you feel really passionately about getting an MFA and you find a program that's like not super expensive, because I know some of them are very expensive, but, and you make great connections, but these days I think there are all sorts of ways to make connections, with social media, you know, just in all of the online communities and all of that. So, which was not as prevalent when I got an MFA. So I think, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously, I don't have an MFA, so I can't really speak to what it will give you. But what I have heard from people is that it gives you time to write. Like it gives you that time to finish a novel or to start a novel to write.
And you have an excuse.
Which
like, it's kind of like you have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Permission slip.
I feel like, I feel like the best way to, I don't know, I don't have an MFA, but I think that such a valuable way to learn writing is by reading.
Yeah.
You know, just, that's how I feel like I've learned to write, is that I read something and I'm inspired by it and I'm like, this just gives me motivation and like the voice and stuff.
Totally.
Yeah. So
speaking of which, anyone who wants to be inspired, Too Good to Be True. We have signed copies. Tell Me Lies. You can also buy all of Sarah's books on our website. Pick them up in the store or we ship. Ladies, listen, it's a wild ride of a book. We had a wild technology ride. And as I said in the green room, it always works out. Sometimes we got to hang for a while, but thank you very, very much to both of you for your grace under pressure, and to all of you for joining us tonight. We are thrilled as always to be here in community with you, talking about books, and especially being with two esteemed writers. Carola, congratulations. Happy Publication Day. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's watching, and Paige and Sarah. Thank you so, so much. This was amazing. And I'm sorry that I had technical difficulties at first.
Oh my gosh. No.
We all. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.